Welcome back once again for another SnowRunner truck review. Today we're going to take a look at a brand new, very different off-road vehicle added to Season 7 for the sole purpose of what it does best, racing. So before we start, I ask that you please help support the channel by liking the video and subscribing to the channel as well. Alright, so without further ado, let's jump into this and check it out. Going back to the 1980s, Kamaz developed the 4326 as a prototype vehicle that was based off of the 4310. However, since most efforts were currently geared toward producing the 4310, the new model did not go into production at all. The series reignited in 1995 with major changes like a large diesel engine, permanent all-wheel drive, and large off-road tires. A newer successor to the 4326 is the 4350. The 4326 unfortunately has not been offered to the private customers since 2015. The Kamaz has been used for multiple things, and it has been retrofitted to do what its unlicensed version does in SnowRunner: racing. In-game, the Azov 43-191 Sprinter lives up to its name with some surprising details that we will get into shortly, yet it does have some downsides that are worth mentioning as well. As usual, the base stats will briefly be on your screen for viewing while we jump right into the downsides list at the number 1 spot, ground clearance. In truth, the Azov doesn't have many performance inhibiting downsides, but I believe one is clearances. Classified as an off-road truck while also having no option for a race kit leaves its clearances similar to its older brother, the 64131. This isn't a huge deal, but this downside goes hand in hand with our next one on the list, notable hang-up issues. Coupled with our number 1 downside, as well as only being a 4x4 with a medium-ish wheelbase, there will be some times that you do get hung up on its frame or slam its chin into terrain as well. While I don't think this occurrence is more than usual compared to other trucks, I felt this one somewhat hindered the Azov, especially on those timed races. Downside number 3, small tires and steering. Now, technically, we could have lumped all 3 of our current downsides because they all limit performance in the same way, by either getting bogged down in deep mud, stuck on roots, or just plain old getting high-centered. The Azov does have a good set of tires, as we will learn later, but 47 inches isn't the largest for an off-road class truck. Lastly, before moving on, I wanted to briefly mention that its steering is slightly slow, and it's evident when racing down those fast, windy trails. Mitigating this requires attention to the position of your front axles, especially at higher speeds. Downside number 4, sporadic to concerning fuel consumption and wheel spin. I never thought I would say this, but the only gearboxes that should be used here would be the Sport or the High Range, which I will get into later. However, because both of these gearboxes have a more relaxed rev cap, the engine will work harder and burn more fuel per minute. On the other hand, due to wheel spin, I usually stick to a transmission that's a little bit slower to combat this, yet I don't feel that this should be the situation with the Azov. As much as the fuel consumption can be sporadic to bad, its wheel spin can be in kind as well. If you've seen my mud running tips collaboration video with Max Power, this should be pretty easy for you to handle. Downside number 5, no trailer support and low trunk supplies. To make this one very brief, the Sprinter cannot tow any trailers whatsoever, and its trunk supplies are not too large if you look at the van space on the vehicle. Now, I could go into a rant about this one, but honestly, I suspected as much when I first saw this vehicle before Season 7 even dropped. And this leads me right into our 6th and final downside, overall limited use. Even from a garage view, players can simply pan through the features and figure out that the Azov really isn't built for much more than, well, racing. However, I do think it can fit into other roles as well, but overall, it's really not a versatile addition to our fleets. Its next best role would probably be a scout, but as an off-road class vehicle. Well, as we can see, the Azov is another specialized vehicle that has few but notable downsides to consider. but it does have some wild upsides that are worth mentioning. Here are the pros for the Azov 43-191 Sprinter. Coming in at upside number 1, unexpected power, all-wheel drive, and differential locking. Sometimes I feel the PTS server is such a spoiler that I just wanted to be a little bit more surprised, which is why this review is a little bit later after the release of Season 7. I just felt I wanted to enjoy the game, testing, and the overall review process rather than be the first one out with a video. The unexpected surprise was the power of the Azov for sure. Not only does the Azov share engines with other very strong, notable vehicles, it also gets an exclusive racing engine that actually boosts its power to tie the Westline V16 at the number 2 spot on torque. With disbelief, I actually looked this up many times, and indeed, it is true. With this amazing power and the always-on features, I would just say that the power is present. Upside number 2, tire options. The Azov has 3 options of tires I believe drivers cannot go wrong with: the SPO1, the OHS2, and the MHS1 sets. I've used all 3 and have been very impressed on how well the Azov performs with them. I did say on my Croc review that it had the best mud rating for all all-terrain tires. Well, now the Sprinter takes that spot currently. In short, I don't think you could go wrong with choosing either of those 3 we just mentioned. Based upon ratings, I have seen areas where the OHS seem better, and then others where the mud or the all-terrains just perform better as well. Upside number 3, gearbox differences. With knowledge of our prior upsides, another surprising highlight is the new Sport gearbox. I believe the high range or the Sport gearbox should be used, but I would test these for yourselves. However, I will share my findings through testing. I find that the Sport gearbox is meant to leave in auto and clutch bump based upon your grip. On the other hand, the high range gearbox left in automatic will reject its higher gears too much and will lose speed. But as we know, high gear in itself blazes through terrain under moderate conditions, and also the consumption is oddly much better than the Sport. The Sport gearbox tends to hold its top gear in rougher areas, and I believe it has something to do with allowing more power throughput, which is evident on engine sound elevating in those areas. I don't want to take too much time on this subject, but I believe either gearbox will do pretty darn well. Yet with this knowledge that we have just found out, I do say that I probably prefer the high range gearbox. Upside number 4, stability. It's obvious that this vehicle is meant to drive at higher speeds, and to be frank, I believe its balance is pretty good all things considered. Its weight characteristics seem tail heavy, more lower to the ground, and it doesn't jar off balance too much. I've driven this truck fast down trails with a little bit of confidence, but it's not impervious to tipping over. Overall, its balance is good for a 4x4. Upside number 5. Fuel capacity. Making our number 5 upside very short, to offset the Sport gearbox consumption values, it's pleasing to see a very large fuel tank with supplies to go even further. Compared to other trucks in its class and across the board, the Azov's range outclasses many of its peers. And finally, closing out our upsides list at the number 6 spot, performance. By playing the Sprinter or just viewing this video, you probably can see that it can fly through some terrain. I do feel other off-road trucks can do similar things, probably a little bit better, but with this racing engine and its gearbox, the Azov can get places pretty quick. Alright, so moving on to my personal ratings for this vehicle. For power, getting an exclusive engine with equal power to both of the twin steers, a 5 here. For terrain navigation, a rating of 3. It does run through terrain really well, but I still felt other trucks could do a better job. With higher racing speeds and a tad slow steering speed, I felt this one would take some time to feel out. For aesthetics, I like how it looks with the custom paint jobs and such, but it's not my absolute favorite. Stability from research and testing seems somewhat trustworthy, which wasn't a big surprise due to the use case for this vehicle. A large fuel tank helped this score, but seeing those burn values from the sport gearbox at times kept this one at a 4. Not being able to support many things outside of racing merits this one a rating of 1. Great power, always on features, with the addition of good weight and tire options, the Azov does pretty well in this department. So in conclusion, the Azov 43-191 Sprinter is a racing vehicle, but I believe it can do other roles as well. However, the best role outside of racing would be scouting, which I actually don't think is a good thing. Scouts in the past have been overly power crept, and the addition of the Azov further strips the appeal of players using traditional scout vehicles. Yet I must say that the new 4x4 does give the Azov a pretty good run for its money. On the other hand, this truck is in the off-road class, yet it supports no add-ons to move any other weight than its own. Honestly, do I think the game needed this truck, especially as late as Season 7? Well, no, but it is kind of fun to drive, and I think it could be a good pick for contests as well as some type of support role. If you plan on using it, give the high range gearbox or the sport gearbox a test, and choose one that works best for you. They both seem viable with some differences, but this is going to boil down to driver choice and feel. So in closing, the Azov 43-191 Sprinter is a powerhouse. Yet I believe all that power is wasted due to lacking practical use in an off-road logging/hauling game. Rather than complaining on what I believe the game should have, I'll continue to find places where I can effectively use this vehicle's strength to help support my current fleet. Try this Trailblazer out and let me know what you think. I really hope this review gave you a fresh, new perspective of the Azov 43-191 Sprinter. Please smash that like button. Definitely share this video with someone who is currently struggling with the game, and subscribe to the channel and hit that bell so you don't miss any future content. Hope you all have a wonderful day. God bless and stay upright.